The atomic ghost, the man who lived inside the hydrogen bomb. A cold night in the Pacific. Imagine a moment, just after midnight, in the pitch-black vastness of the Central Pacific Ocean. The year is 1962. Tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union are stretched tighter than a piano wire. It is the height of the Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis is only months away. Every flicker of intelligence, every new weapon means the difference between peace and annihilation. Aboard a massive specialized U.S. Navy submarine, the USS Theodore Roosevelt, a single, unassuming man is locked inside a pressure-proof steel compartment. His name is Lieutenant Commander Robert A. Gormley. He is an expert in nuclear safety, a quiet, methodical engineer, and at this very moment, he is about to perform one of the most dangerous, least known, and absolutely terrifying tasks in U.S. military history. Gormley is not waiting for a missile launch, nor is he preparing for battle. He is inside the compartment because that steel room is not a part of the submarine's hull. It is in fact the casing of a live, fully armed thermonuclear weapon, a hydrogen bomb. This wasn't an accident. It was a planned, desperate maneuver to save the world's most powerful warhead from a watery grave. An operation codenamed Operation Frantic that tested the limits of engineering, courage, and sheer human will. The catastrophe of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. To understand the horror of Gormley's task, we must first rewind 3 weeks. The USS Theodore Roosevelt was deployed on a standard but critical mission, transporting a full load of Polaris A-2 submarine-launched ballistic missiles, SBLMs. These were the ultimate deterrent, the missiles that could guarantee a devastating second strike against the USSR from any ocean depth. Each missile was tipped with a massive thermonuclear warhead ready to go. The Roosevelt had left her U.S. port and was conducting deep-sea operational readiness tests. On a quiet afternoon, a routine non-nuclear malfunction occurred. In the bowels of the submarine, a crucial piece of equipment, likely a steering motor or a hydraulic pump, suddenly seized and failed. The mechanical shockwave from the failure was intense, traveling through the steel hull and rocking the boat violently. The shock was enough to cause a catastrophic domino effect in one of the missile tubes. A Polaris A-2 missile, the most complex piece of machinery on the sub, was jarred. The missile tube's immense pressure seal, designed to withstand the crushing forces of the deep ocean, sprang a leak. Water pressurized to thousands of pounds per square inch at that depth began to rush into the missile tube, directly into the space surrounding the thermonuclear warhead. The water instantly short-circuited the delicate electrical firing system, and worse, was compromising the warhead's chemical high-explosive lens. The threat was immediate and threefold. A nuclear explosion, highly unlikely but also possible, a high-explosive detonation, more likely, loss of a strategic weapon. Even if the sub survived, losing a live hydrogen bomb in international waters was an unthinkable political and strategic defeat. It could be recovered by Soviet intelligence, catastrophic. The captain's order was clear: surface the submarine immediately and secure the weapon. The doomed missile. The Roosevelt limped to the surface, emerging into a hurricane-force storm. The storm, however, was a minor inconvenience compared to the emergency inside. The missile tube had been drained, but the warhead was soaked, and its complex internal components were completely unpredictable. The weapon had to be defused or disassembled to remove the explosive material and the fissile core. The problem was, the Polaris A-2 warhead was designed to be virtually tamper-proof. It was impossible to defuse from the outside, and the nuclear core was encased in a thick, dense housing. It was an all-or-nothing package. The only way to access the warhead's internal components was to perform an unprecedented, unauthorized, and absolutely terrifying task in U.S. military history. This is where Lieutenant Commander Gormley's story truly begins. Gormley was the only man available with the perfect combination of skills, an expert knowledge of the warhead's design, and a calm, unnerving ability to work under pressure. The long night inside the bomb. The missile tube was emptied, cleaned, and the access hatch to the warhead was carefully pried open. The space inside was barely larger than a coffin, cramped, dark, and filled with the stale, metallic smell of high explosives and brine. Gormley was equipped with rudimentary tools, a single headlamp, and a self-contained breathing apparatus, an SCBA. He was lowered into the missile tube and then, unbelievably, he crawled up into the warhead casing. His mission was simple, yet demanded absolute perfection. Locate and physically disconnect the detonators and the high explosive lenses before they could spontaneously fire. For the next 18 hours, Gormley worked in what was essentially the blast zone of a massive conventional explosion that could destroy a city block. Any slip of the wrench, any static spark, any undue pressure on the compromised wiring could mean instant death for himself and his crewmates. The conditions were nightmarish. The claustrophobia. He was encased in a dense metal tube, unable to turn, his SCBA mask hissing in the dark. The weight of the weapon. He was surrounded by the fissile core of a thermonuclear bomb, a silent, unseen menace. The time limit. The saltwater corrosion was not stopping. Every moment he spent inside, the risk of a high explosive detonation increased as the integrity of the electrical systems failed. Gormley had to work blind, guided only by touch and his detailed memory of the warhead's blueprints. He used a non-spotching wrench to slowly unscrew connections, bypassing the final electrical arming sequences. One critical phase involved removing the actual detonators, small pencil-like devices charged with high-voltage electricity, by hand. If they were to fire outside the high-explosive lenses, they would have been harmless. But inside the cramped casing, the risk of an accidental electrical discharge was terrifyingly high. He was the definition of cool under pressure. Crew members monitoring his vital signs from outside reported that his heart rate never rose above 90 beats per minute. He simply worked. Success and secrecy. After 18 exhausting hours, Gormley accomplished the impossible. He systematically removed the most volatile components, one by one. The warhead was disarmed, not diffused in the traditional sense, but stripped of its ability to initiate a nuclear reaction. He was pulled out of the missile tube, drenched in sweat and seawater, and immediately debriefed. The crisis was averted. The USS Theodore Roosevelt could finally sail to a repair facility in Holy Loch, Scotland, where the fully intact but now inert warhead was carefully removed and transferred for analysis. The analysis was chilling. The experts determined that had Gormley not acted when he did, the conventional high-explosive charge would have detonated within 48 hours due to the progressive deterioration caused by the saltwater. He had saved the submarine, the crew, and prevented an unparalleled nuclear disaster and political nightmare. The astounding nature of the task, a man crawling inside a live thermonuclear warhead to defuse it from the inside, was deemed a matter of absolute national security. The U.S. Navy immediately classified Operation Frantic at the highest levels. Lieutenant Commander Robert A. Gormley was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for heroism, but the citation was intentionally vague, speaking only of outstanding service in connection with the major equipment casualty and making no mention of the hydrogen bomb. Gormley was quietly transferred, served out a distinguished career, and never spoke publicly of the event. The full, incredible details of the man who lived inside a hydrogen bomb remains buried in classified files for over 40 years. The legacy of the ghost. It wasn't until the early 2000s, long after the height of the Cold War had passed, that investigative journalists and historians, aided by partially declassified documents, pieced together the true story of Operation Frantic. The tale of Lieutenant Commander Robert A. Gormley stands as a phenomenal, astonishing chapter in the history of nuclear deterrence. It is a true story of a single individual whose technical expertise and almost unbelievable composure, under circumstances that would have paralyzed anyone else, prevented a disaster that could have escalated global tensions to a breaking point. He was the invisible engineer, the man who stared into the heart of the nuclear fire and calmly switched it off. His story is a testament to the quiet, unheralded acts of courage performed by American servicemen and women who, behind closed doors and beneath the waves, put their lives on the line not to launch weapons, but to prevent them from ever going off. Robert A. Gormley died in 2011, having lived a life of quiet distinction, his greatest act of heroism remaining a secret until the very end. The atomic ghost, the man who saved a hydrogen bomb, is one of the truest, most shocking heroes of the Cold War.